when will he be sworn in? And reports say that it could happen this Saturday. Meanwhile, the opposition India Bloc has also met today and they are keeping their cards close to their chest. The Congress president said they would take appropriate decisions at the appropriate time. We will decode what this means. Also, what price is the BJP paying for its alliance? Chandrababu Naidu and Nitish Kumar are wily customers. We'll tell you their demands and wish list in exchange for support. Moving on to Israel, Biden is growing more and more critical of Netanyahu. Yet when it comes to aid, the US still gives Israel everything it needs. In Ukraine, Russia says French troops are legitimate targets. US President Biden is in France. What's on his agenda? The world is in debt, but the rich are only getting richer. What explains this? And it's World Environment Day today. We will tell you why policies matter more than cleaning drives. But first, the headlines. Turkey jails a pro-Kurdish mayor for nearly 20 years. Just days ago, he was removed from his post and detained. The arrest led to brawls inside Turkey's parliament. Authorities claim the mayor's party is linked to the outlawed PKK Kurdish militants. South Africa's Sports and Culture Minister charged with corruption. He is accused of taking bribes. The minister was briefly arrested before he got bail. This comes as his party, the ANC, struggles to form a coalition government. Germany continues to bulk up its defences. Berlin will buy 20 new Eurofighter jets from Airbus. This is in addition to the 38 jets ordered in 2020. Germany has been on a defence spending spree since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. The UK's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and opposition leader Keir Starmer clash in a TV debate. They spar over taxes, healthcare and the cost of living crisis. A Snap poll said that the Prime Minister performed better than his rival, but Starmer is heavily tipped to replace Sunak in the July election. And age is no bar for Fiji's Prime Minister. The 75-year-old leader wins a bronze medal at an international athletics championship. A coup maker turned politician, Fiji's Prime Minister is also a former soldier who returned to power in 2022.
We are in NDA. I am going for NDA meeting.
New Delhi is buzzing in a way it hasn't for a long time. Political reporters have respawned. Coalition partners are camping here and the haggling is back. The haggling for cabinet berths and portfolios. It's like Delhi has gone back to the 1990s. So what's the latest tea? Both alliances held meetings today. First, the BJP-led NDA alliance and then the Congress-led India Bloc. We'll focus on the NDA first. All eyes were on two regional leaders, Chandrababu Naidu of the TDP, the Telugu Desam Party, soon to be Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh, and Nitish Kumar of the JDU, already the Chief Minister of Bihar. The BJP needs their support to form a government. So the coverage was non-stop. Cameras followed them to the airport, cameras tracked them inside the plane and all the way to their residences in New Delhi. Even before reaching, Chandrababu Naidu had made his position clear. He said he would stick with the NDA.
I am also experienced. I have seen so many political changes in this country. We are in NDA. I am going for NDA meeting. In course of time, anything, we'll report to you. Thank you.
Then came the big meeting. All the NDA allies gathered at Prime Minister Modi's residence. They agreed on two things. First, to stake claim on forming a government. And second, to elect Modi as the NDA's leader, meaning their pick for Prime Minister. That's how government formation works. If you have the numbers, you go to the president of the country, you show a letter of support, and you stake claim to power. Then the Prime Minister and his cabinet take oath. And finally, the parliament convenes. That's when the floor test happens. Right now, we are at the first stage where NDA leaders were expected to meet the president today. That has not happened so far. But they will officially stake claim this week. What about the swearing in? Reports say it's on the 8th of June, which is Saturday. That's when Prime Minister Modi is expected to take oath for the third time. He convened the cabinet earlier today. He had a final message for his team. And this is what he said. Winning and losing are part of politics. The number game keeps going on. We have done good work for 10 years and we will continue to do so in the future as well. A bit of a hint there, maybe an acknowledgement of their reduced majority. But like the Prime Minister said, the work goes on. At the cabinet meeting, all ministers resigned, which is protocol. Then the Prime Minister went to the Rashtrapati Bhavan. There he handed over his resignation to President Murmu. Again, it's protocol, which brings us to the new government. What will it look like? Who will be the ministers? Well, we know one thing for sure. This will be very different from the previous two ministries. Because back then, the BJP had its own majority. So they retained all the key portfolios like finance, home, defense, railways and power. Maybe not this time. The BJP needs allies to form a government. So these allies will have demands. Let's look at their wish list. And a big disclaimer here, this is all based on reports and political sources. This has not been officially confirmed by either side. First, let's look at the TDP, the Telugu Desam Party. They have 16 seats in the Lok Sabha. Here's Chandrababu Naidu's wish list. First is the Lok Sabha Speaker's post. He wants this, and it's very important. The Speaker conducts the affairs of the Lok Sabha, that is the lower house of Indian Parliament. And it's been a subject of controversy recently because the opposition says that the Speaker acts in a partisan manner. So if the TDP gets Speaker, it would be huge. Another demand is special status for Andhra Pradesh. This comes with a lot of advantages, more funds, more tax concessions and more incentives. And finally, the most important demand, around 8 ministries. That's what they want, 8 ministries and quite consequential ones too, like road transport, rural development, health, housing and urban affairs, agriculture, IT and communications, education and MOS finance. MOS is Minister of State. It's a bit like the junior finance minister. Around 5 of these are cabinet berths. Now we come to the JDU, that is Nitish Kumar's party. They're asking for at least 3 cabinet berths. And they too have a preference. They want railways and agro-industries. A third ally is the Shiv Sena Shinde, the party of Maharashtra's chief minister. They have 7 seats in the Lok Sabha and they're seeking 1 cabinet berth. Same with the LJP, the Lok Janashakti party, again from Bihar. They have 5 seats in this new Lok Sabha and they too want a cabinet berth, possibly food and public distribution. So let's recap. NDA allies are asking for close to 10 cabinet berths. Has the BJP agreed to it? Apparently a deal has been struck, but we'll have to wait for the finer details to come out. Plus, it's not just about the ministries. Allies can also demand other things, like policy changes, or shifting out certain existing ministers, or even a common minimum program. In fact, the JDU is reportedly pushing for it. A common minimum program. What does it mean? It's basically a policy document for the coalition. What issues can be taken up? What are the priorities? And what are the no-go zones? Apparently, the JDU wants such a document. It does give clarity to the people, but it also limits the Prime Minister. Of course, this is all based on sources and reports. Like I said initially, the final picture will be clear only by Saturday. That is, if the opposition does not spring a surprise. They've also had a busy day. Let's tell you about the latest from the opposition camp. After the NDA met, leaders of the opposition India Bloc gathered at Mallikarjun Kharge's residence. That's the Congress president, Mallikarjun Kharge. The meeting took place at his place. A total of 33 leaders attended. All the parties in the India alliance were represented here. But some big names were missing, like Uddhav Thackeray from the other Shiv Sena and Mamata Banerjee from the TMC. They sent their representatives instead. Before the meeting, some leaders tried to set the tone to build pressure on the NDA. They said Prime Minister Modi did not have the mandate to govern and that he should step down.
देश ने नरेंद्र मोदी जी को साफ कह दिया है कि हम आपको नहीं चाहते हैं. And this is the main thing that this election has said. The country has unanimously and clearly stated We do not want Mr. Narendra Modi and Mr. Amit Shah to be involved in the running of this country.
The India Bloc is yet to concede the election. So will they mount a bid to challenge the BJP? They've not said no. After a meeting today that lasted for more than 2 hours, this is what Mallikarjun Kharge said.
The constituents of India Bloc thank the people of India for the overwhelming support received by our alliance. The people's mandate has given befitting reply to the BJP and their politics of hate, corruption and deprivation. This is a mandate in defense of the Constitution of India and against price rise, unemployment and crony capitalism, and also to save democracy. The India Bloc will continue to fight against the fascist rule of the BJP led by Modi. We will take appropriate steps at the appropriate time to realize the people's desire not to be ruled by the BJP's government, and this is our decision.
Basically what he's saying is this, that the mandate is against the government and we will take a decision at an appropriate time, whatever that means. His alliance partners have been more forthright about this. Uddhav Thackeray, for instance, he said the opposition alliance should put forward their own prime ministerial candidate. But you see, to form a government, you need the numbers, and this alliance is going to need more support, more partners with seats. And who could those partners be? Some photographs have sparked speculation today. I'm sure you've seen these. That's Nitish Kumar, the Chief Minister of Bihar and leader of the JDU, which is a top ally of the BJP. With him is Tejasvi Yadav, leader of the RJD or Rashtriya Janata Dal, and a former ally of Nitish Kumar. Now, Tejasvi Yadav served as Bihar's Deputy Chief Minister. He was Nitish Kumar's coalition partner. But just ahead of the general election, Nitish Kumar dumped Tejasvi Yadav and he switched over to the NDA. That happened earlier this year. So now they're both in rival camps. Nitish with the BJP-led alliance and Tejasvi with the Congress-led alliance. This morning, both these gentlemen were on the same flight to New Delhi, and that sparked fresh rumors about what they could potentially discuss on the flight and whether they will join hands again. Although, come to think of it, you don't have to be on a flight together to rekindle your alliance. You can just pick up the phone and talk. But given how charged the atmosphere is, pictures like these fuel speculation, and Tejasvi Yadav did the rest by releasing a cryptic message. This is what he posted on X. It said, "Wait and watch. We will see something better in the future." Plus, Nitish Kumar's reputation does not help. He's famous for his flip-flop. Since 2015, he switched sides as many as 4 times. 4 times in 9 years. It tells you how fickle he is as a political partner. So what if he switches again? Reports say he's being wooed by the India Bloc. Apparently, they've made him an offer, the post of Deputy Prime Minister. Again, we cannot confirm it. But this has been doing the rounds since yesterday, that the Congress-led alliance has made an offer to the Bihar Chief Minister. And they've sent out feelers to Chandrababu Naidu too. He's the other big ally of the BJP. We just told you about him, the leader of the Telugu Desam Party or TDP. But so far, neither side has been won over. Both the JDU and the TDP say that they remain loyal to the NDA. But in politics, as in life, you can take nothing for granted, least of all promises of support. So the NDA remains vulnerable and the opposition will try to exploit its weakness. Again, Uddhav Thackeray made a move today. Before the NDA's meeting, he sent a message to both these allies, the TDP and the JDU. And what was his message? Remember how the BJP treated you. That's what he said. He said the BJP has done nothing for the states of Bihar and Andhra Pradesh. These states got no extra budget allocations, and these allies, TDP and JDU, got no significant representation in the government. Thackeray tried to remind and rub it in. And that's a worry for the BJP. How they treat their allies now will decide their future in power. And this extends to local politics as well. There are assembly elections in Bihar next year, for instance. The NDA's unity will come under pressure, with Nitish Kumar sure to extract more than his pound of flesh. So expect turbulence in Indian politics in the weeks and months ahead. Now let's look at India's stock markets. Yesterday we saw a bloodbath. The markets saw their worst fall in 4 years since the Wuhan virus pandemic. Yesterday was the worst. But today it seems like the markets were in recovery mode. Investors have begun picking up the pieces. And they posted a decent upswing today. The Nifty ended at over 22,600. It rose by more than 3%. The Sensex saw a similar recovery. It ended the trading day at over 74,300. Again, more than 3% up. Now, as the name suggests, the Nifty 50 tracks 50 major companies. Yesterday, 42 out of these 50 companies saw their share prices fall. Today, all 50 companies saw gains, and the market optimism was seen across industries. Bank stocks were up, both private and public sector banks. They saw a recovery. The auto sector is in fact doing better than it was doing on Monday. That was before the results. Monday saw record gains on the markets. Today, the auto sector was doing better than that. The pharma sector also got a shot in the arm. IT stocks have almost made a full recovery. And yesterday's loan saving grace, the FMCG sector, was up by more than 4% today. So everywhere you look, the recovery is underway. What does all of this mean? Is the economy back on track after a 24-hour meltdown? Well, not really, because nothing actually happened to any of these companies. And we said this yesterday too. Nothing had changed in the inner workings of Indian firms. The election results have nothing to do with how many cars came out of an assembly line or how many got sold. So yesterday was not about economic fundamentals or performance. Yesterday was about sentiment, about fear. Investors were afraid that the government might change, meaning an end to the continuity of the current economic policies which have been in place for a decade now. The fear is that the BJP might dial down on infrastructure spending, for instance, to appease rural voters. For the last 10 years, the government has been focused on infrastructure and manufacturing. But these projects come at a cost, a political cost with rural voters. They are the ones usually displaced when a new highway is built or a new factory is set up. So the fear is that the BJP will hold off on new projects. And that fear is what brought the markets crashing down yesterday, even though the companies themselves had done nothing wrong. But today that fear has started to recede. Analysts predict that India's growth trajectory will not be derailed. The next budget will be out in July. Until then, it will be business as usual. So this helped reduce the fear, as did news of today's alliance talks. The next NDA government is already in the works. Their swearing-in ceremony is scheduled for this Saturday. All of this points to business as usual. So if everything seems normal, why did the markets react the way they did yesterday? Why not just wait for the final results before selling? Why get caught in a frenzy? Well, because the markets are not always logical. They fluctuate based on emotions. For investors, yesterday was about fear. Today was about hope. The hope for economic stability and continuity. And the markets have responded to these basic human emotions. You know the drill after elections? Messages pour in from across the world, well wishes, praises and promises to work closer. And this time it's no different. India's neighbors were the first to send messages. The Prime Minister of Bhutan, the Prime Minister of Nepal, the President of Sri Lanka, the President of the Maldives and the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, all of them have congratulated Prime Minister Modi. They also noted that this is his third consecutive term, something that is rare in politics. You may have noticed that two neighbors are missing in this list. That's Pakistan and China. Islamabad has not sent a message yet. Some provincial ministers did congratulate the people of India, but nothing from their Prime Minister. What about China? Nothing from President Xi Jinping, but their foreign ministry did congratulate Modi. Listen in.
We noted that the results of India's general elections have been announced. China congratulates the BJP, led by Prime Minister Modi, and along with their National Democratic Alliance on their victory. A healthy and stable China-India relationship is in the common interest of both sides and is conducive to peace and development in the region and the world.
Don't read too much into that. It's mostly protocol language put together. More than 50 countries have sent wishes. Latvia, Lithuania, Mauritius, which is an old partner, Myanmar, Singapore, Japan, Iran, and also Taiwan. From the West, Italy was the first to send a message. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni congratulated Modi. Remember, Italy is hosting the G7 summit next week, and Prime Minister Modi is expected to attend it. French President Emmanuel Macron has also extended his wishes. So has US President Joe Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin. In fact, Modi spoke on the phone to President Putin. He also had a conversation with the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Two wartime leaders also congratulated the Prime Minister. That's Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine and Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel. Remember, India has refused to take sides in both these wars. So Zelensky, Putin, Netanyahu, they were all congratulating the Indian leader. The Israeli Prime Minister also added a line in Hindi. He wrote, "Badhai ho," which means congratulations. But let's also look at what comes after. What will the new government focus on? What will be the foreign policy priorities for New Delhi? The first issue is the personal. Three leaders have dominated India's foreign policy. That's Prime Minister Modi, Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar, and National Security Advisor Ajit Doval. Will this trio remain under the new coalition? Will the Prime Minister make changes? That will have a bearing. Maybe not on the broader foreign policy of India, but definitely on the strategies and the style. The swearing in is apparently slated for June 8th. As of now, that's the date. So we will have clarity by then. With that said, let's look at priorities. What should the new government focus on? Mainly three things. Number one is the neighborhood. India's relations in South Asia are going through a rough patch. The Maldives is pivoting to China. They've even expelled Indian soldiers. Sri Lanka is also slipping into China's grip. Despite the debt crisis, they're still taking Beijing's money. Nepal also looks iffy at this point. In March, a new foreign minister took over in Kathmandu. He visited China first instead of India. So the neighborhood should be the government's first priority. A lot of bridges have been burnt. They must be repaired. Number two is the global south. This mission began in Modi's last term. New Delhi hosted a couple of summits for global south nations. It also pushed to expand the G20. But now it's time to build on that. China is making deep inroads in Africa and Latin America, so India must hit the road running. This decade will likely require a global south alliance. There will be more focus on climate talks, on global trade rules, and on digital security. So we need global south countries to band up. Finally, focus number three, a strategy to deter China, both military and financial. Last week, a few satellite pictures emerged from the border. We told you about them. These pictures showed Chinese fighter jets near Sikkim, almost 14 of them. So India needs to make military preparations too, not to escalate, but to deter Beijing. Same with the financial plans. India's trade with China keeps increasing. It was $87 billion in 2019, but after the Galwan clashes, it has actually increased. Last year, it was $118 billion, and this trade is stacked in China's favor. So New Delhi must correct this, either by promoting domestic investments or by creating new supply chains elsewhere, maybe in friendly countries. And these three priorities cannot wait. I know coalitions often lead to more focus on domestic affairs, but India cannot afford that. Luckily, there is multi-partisan support for India's foreign policy, so it's all about the will, not the numbers. Our next story is also about global leaders, two in particular, US President Joe Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Biden has been criticizing Netanyahu for a while now. Every other day, you hear Biden complaining about the Israeli Prime Minister, about Netanyahu's approach to the war, his lack of concern with civilian casualties, Netanyahu's indifference to the Palestinian refugees in Rafah. Biden keeps complaining about all of this, and Netanyahu keeps ignoring his biggest ally every time. All of Biden's so-called red lines have been crossed. Biden said no to Israel's invasion of Rafah. All eyes are on Rafah now. And what do they see? Netanyahu playing hopscotch with Biden's red lines. Biden gave Netanyahu a ceasefire deal. This is after Israel rejected a deal that Hamas was on board with. Biden desperately wants Israel to take the new plan, but what does Netanyahu do? He sends out officials who say this.
He said, and I quote, "The outline that President Biden presented is partial. The war will be stopped for the purpose of returning hostages, and then we will proceed with further discussions."
So there will be no permanent ceasefire. Netanyahu will resume the war after a while, and in the meantime, he may even open another front.
Yesterday, the land was burning here, and I'm glad you put it out. But the ground was also on fire in Lebanon. Whoever thinks that he will hurt us and we will sit idly by is making a big mistake. We are prepared for a very strong action in the north. One way or another, we will restore security to the north.
So even if the war with Hamas is paused, Netanyahu may just go after Hezbollah instead. There's no talk of any lasting peace and calm in West Asia, just one crisis after another. Amid all this aggressive rhetoric, reporters asked Joe Biden about why Netanyahu was doing this. Here's what a reporter asked him, I'm quoting, "Some in Israel have suggested that Netanyahu is prolonging the war for his own political self-preservation. Do you believe that?" That was the question that the US president was asked. His response was, and I quote again, "There is every reason for people to draw that conclusion." So Biden said that there is every reason for people to believe that Netanyahu was prolonging the war for political gain. While Biden did not say that he agreed with this theory, he said that it's a logical conclusion to come to. Does this mean that Netanyahu's game is up? If Biden sees through his ploy, surely he wouldn't allow Netanyahu to continue. Well, not really. Reporters asked the White House National Security spokesperson about President Biden's comments, and here's what he said.
I think the president was very clear in his answer on that, and we'll let the prime minister speak to his own politics and to what his critics are saying. And the president was referencing what many critics have said. But for our part, we're going to make sure that Israel has what it needs to continue to eliminate the threat by Hamas.
Basically, the spokesperson said that Biden was quoting Netanyahu's critics, and the US will still give Israel everything that it needs. Everything includes more weapons, like a squadron of American F-35 jets. Israel has signed a $3 billion deal to buy more F-35s, while Biden is saying that Netanyahu is prolonging the war. So who does Biden have to blame? Why would Netanyahu change course? He's getting everything that he wants. Biden resumed bomb shipments to Israel. He's now giving them F-35 fighter jets. So what exactly does Netanyahu have to fear? He can go on ignoring Biden's rebukes because he knows that the US will never actually stop helping him, which means that all the criticism is just for show. It's all dramatic hand-wringing. Netanyahu can do whatever he wants and Biden will just wag his finger disapprovingly. If this is the reality, why does Biden even bother with the theatrics? Unless he actually does something, his jibes are meaningless, and Netanyahu knows this. Biden probably knows this too. And the rest of us watching this charade can definitely see through the hypocrisy. Vantage continues after a short break.
Mr. Lalu was a railway
I'm just saying, will Mr. Modi sort of want to part with what has been one of the principal sort of, totems of his government's development agenda? He's always, taken pride in the fact that you have had all these Vande Bharat trains, etc.
But that's the thing with this, with the conundrum of Mr. Modi is this, that the allies, they know they can demand their pound of flesh and they will want the heavyweight ministries. And the heavyweight ministries in this case will probably be not just a combination of prestige, but will also be places which can be used for dispense favors, for where you can use for clout and all of those things. So railways certainly fits that bill.
We have political guests joining us as well.
Yes, Sushiben Shah is with us, Shazia Almi is with us, Abbas Haider is with us. I was just looking at the data that Rajiv Mishra and our research team has sent, that's saying despite a 90% increase in seats for the Congress party from 52 to 99, there are 16 states and union territories where the Congress saw fall in its vote share. So very interesting numbers that they say Meghalaya, Punjab, Tripura, Jammu Kashmir, Andaman Nicobar Islands, Puducherry, Goa, NCT of Delhi, Kerala, Madhya Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Odisha, Gujarat, West Bengal, Sikkim and Chhattisgarh, the Congress actually saw a fall in vote share compared to 2019. So there's a fall in the Congress vote share in all these places where there was actually a rise, where the Congress increased its vote share in 2019.
So are you saying that the Congress increased its seats largely in those states where it won last time?
No, no. It's like in Kerala, they've dropped in vote share, but they've still won more seats. So
Okay.
Now let's talk about the other war, the war in Ukraine. That conflict is on the verge of escalation again. Russian officials have issued new threats. They say that any foreign troops in Ukraine are quote-unquote legitimate targets. Moscow is talking about French troops. France plans to send its military personnel to train Ukrainian soldiers. French President Emmanuel Macron has been talking about this for weeks. So Russia issued a new warning. Meanwhile, Ukraine has started attacking Russia with American weapons. This was once taboo, but last week Washington gave Kiev permission, and Ukraine has quickly trained American guns on Russia's Belgorod. Our next report has the details.
As for the French instructors, I have reason to believe there are many specific facts on this matter, that they are already working in Ukraine. Regardless of whether they are members of the French armed forces or simply mercenaries, they represent an absolutely legitimate target for our armed forces.
That was Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov. He made that announcement on Tuesday. He said French instructors are working in Ukraine and that they are legitimate targets for Russia. For a while now, France has wanted to send its troops to Ukraine. Macron keeps bringing up the possibility. He says the French troops will go as advisors. They won't participate in the actual combat. Instead, they will help train Ukrainian soldiers. That is what Macron claims. But it seems that Russia doesn't care much for this passive French role either. Moscow's view is simple. If you send your troops to our target zone, they are fair game for Russian missiles. Lavrov also said that Russia won't differentiate between French military personnel and mercenaries. If either of them are in Ukraine, they will get hit. This could mean a potential escalation, because Russia could directly kill a NATO member nation's soldiers. It seems Russia doesn't really want to do this, though. It is trying to convince the troops to stay away. Posters have come up near the French embassy in Moscow, calling on French soldiers not to repeat the mistakes of their ancestors. The posters mention French troops who fought for Nazi Germany and who died fighting against the Soviet Union. Russia is hoping this history lesson convinces the French troops to stay away from Ukraine. But if not, their presence will be another new escalation. Because one has already taken place over the weekend. Ukraine has started using Western weapons to strike Russian territory. For the last 2 years, Ukraine could not strike Russian territory with Western weapons. All the donated weapons were only for defense, only to be used on Ukrainian land. But that restriction has been lifted. Last week, the US gave Ukraine permission to use its weapons to hit Russian soil. Kyiv is now allowed to fire American howitzers and HIMARS at Russia, and this has already begun. A Ukrainian official said a HIMARS was used to hit Belgorod, the Russian region that borders northeastern Ukraine. That is where the Russians are mobilizing, in a bid to capture Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv. Russia's Kharkiv offensive is why the West changed its stance, and the moment they did, Ukraine began to strike back. This is the first time that American weapons are being fired into Russian territory. Amid these new tensions, French troops in Ukraine will be an added provocation. Question is, can the West really risk backing Russia into a corner?
In 2018, US President Donald Trump was set to visit the Ain Marne American Cemetery. It's located in France. It's where hundreds of US Marines killed in the First World War are buried. Trump was supposed to go there, but in the end, the visit was called off. Why? Because it was raining. Believe it or not, Trump thought that the rain would affect his hair, which sounds very much like him. And in true Trump fashion, he took things further. He apparently said that the cemetery was filled with losers. Of course, the comment did not go down well. These were army veterans after all. Biden raised it many times since then, especially on the campaign trail. And now he's set to visit the same cemetery. The US President, Joe Biden this time, is currently in France. He arrived today morning in Paris. He was greeted by the French Prime Minister. He was given a guard of honor. It was the start of a grand affair. Now, the purpose of the visit is quite straightforward. It's to mark the D-Day anniversary. In 1944, Allied troops landed on the beaches of Normandy, and it was to free Europe from Nazi occupation. This was the largest military invasion by sea in history. So it is a special tribute, and Biden won't be there alone. He will be joined by French President Emmanuel Macron, of course, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, and others. It's a show of Western unity. And that's the agenda on paper. But in reality, there's a lot more at stake. There's a lot more on the agenda. Biden has two things to do. First is reassuring his allies, and two, the Russia-Ukraine war. So let's take them one by one. Biden came to power promising a return to traditional US foreign policy. He promised to defend democracy. He promised to strengthen alliances, and he's mostly done that. In the coming weeks, Biden has two more summits, the G7 summit in Italy and the NATO summit in Washington. So the US is very much back in traditional alliances. But the fear remains. Because it's election season in America and Biden is not exactly in a good position. So American partners elsewhere have one question on their mind. What if Donald Trump comes back? What if he wins the presidential election? Will he pull out of the NATO? What happens to the American security commitments if he does? That's the big worry. And it will be conveyed to Biden during this visit. The other concern is the Ukraine war and where it's heading. On Friday, Zelensky will be in Paris. The Ukrainian president will meet Biden and Macron, and he will talk about Kiev's needs. The meeting will come at a critical time because Russia has opened a new front in the war. It is making gains every day. Meanwhile, Ukraine is barely managing. They lack manpower, they lack ammunition. So they've been pushing for Western help. And who better to talk about it than Joe Biden, given that Washington is footing most of Kiev's defense bill. And while Biden rallies European leaders against Russia, he will also face another dilemma. That's the Israel-Hamas war. This is Biden's first visit to Europe since this war broke out in Gaza. Initially, they were all supporting Israel, but now it's been 8 months. 36,000 Palestinians have been killed. So Israel's war is under intense scrutiny, and Europe is increasingly critical. Last week, Biden floated a peace plan. The G7 endorsed it, but Israel has only stepped up its offensive since then. And that puts the American leader in an awkward position. Plus, there are stark differences even within Europe. 4 nations, 4 European countries have already recognized the state of Palestine, so Biden has an uphill battle. He's in Europe to strengthen transatlantic ties, to shore up support for Ukraine, but it's not going to be easy for him. He may unite Europe for one war, but the other one will be a battle even for the US president. The world is in debt, almost to the tune of $320 trillion. And who owes this debt? Well, everyone, from households to governments. A cost of living crisis has gripped the globe. Inflation is rising, so people are borrowing more, and so are governments. But how much debt is too much debt? And when does this debt become unsustainable? That is one side of our next story. Here's the other side. As the global economy struggles, the rich are only getting richer. Their numbers are rising to record highs. The world has never had so many rich people before. Our next report explains why.
2 wars, multiple conflicts, inflation, a cost of living crisis. The global economy is going through a lot. It is on course to record its worst half-decade of growth in 30 years. But that isn't affecting the wealthy. The world's richest are only getting richer. Look at the high net worth individuals. That's those with investable assets of $1 million. Their numbers have gone up by almost 5.1%. There are now 22.8 million high net worth individuals in the world. As for their wealth, it's risen to $86.8 trillion, an increase of almost 5% since 2023. Since 2020, the world's 5 richest men have doubled their fortune. They are now worth $869 billion. This way, the world may have its first trillionaire in a decade. Since 2020, the world's billionaires are richer by $3 trillion. Their wealth has grown thrice the rate of inflation. But what's also increasing is the gap between the rich and the poor. People are working more jobs, they are working longer, but their wealth is declining. Right now, it will take 229 years for the world to eradicate poverty. And debt is piling up as well. The world is in debt to the tune of almost $320 trillion. Now, the world has a population of 8.1 billion. Divide the debt among all of them, and it's still $39,000 per person. Imagine that. This total debt of almost $320 trillion combines borrowings from households, businesses, and governments. Household debt covers your loans, mortgages, and credit card debt. In 2024, it was worth $59 trillion. Then there's business debt, money that companies use to finance their operations. That stands at $164 trillion. And lastly, there's government debt. It hit a record $97 trillion in 2023, and nearly 1/3 of it is owed by developing nations. And with the borrowing increasing, interest on public debt has jumped to $847 billion last year. 1 in 3 countries is spending more on paying interest than on healthcare, education, and climate action. Now, the world has long been in debt, and it's only increasing. But the question is, how much debt is too much debt? When does it become unsustainable? Debts are often risky, especially for smaller economies. Plus, in an unstable world, it puts many people on the edge. One crisis could tip many countries over the line.
Today is World Environment Day. It sounds like a typical essay topic in school, doesn't it? And that is the problem. The United Nations selected this day in 1972. They said June 5th will be Environment Day. Around 3,500 events were organized today. Saplings were planted in the Maldives. Green murals were unveiled in the US, and cleaning drives were organized in India. It's great PR for everyone. The celebrities post nice pictures on social media, world leaders belt out advice, and by tomorrow, everyone forgets. And that is the problem. Cleaning drives do matter. But guess what matters more? Large-scale policy decisions, things like green investments and climate financing. That's what we need to focus on. Some new data is out. It tells us how much rich countries have contributed to climate finance. The number was $116 billion in 2022, $116 billion, which is very significant because climate financing has never touched $100 billion. So rich countries are saying, well done, we have hit a milestone. But as always, there is more to the story. First of all, they're late. $100 billion was supposed to be raised in the year 2020. They finally did it 2 years late. And secondly, most of this money is loans, meaning it has to be paid back. Around 69% of the $116 billion is debt, 69% of it. That's around $63 billion of debt. Only 28% is grants. And experts are questioning this. They're asking, how is this climate justice? And we agree. Let me explain why. Imagine you're driving your car on the road. Suddenly there's an accident. Another driver smashes into your car. It's all their fault. You didn't even know what was happening. The other driver promises to pay for the damage, but later they give you a loan to fix your car back up, a loan that you will have to repay. Does this sound like a fair deal to you? I'm sure it doesn't, because it's not. And that's exactly what this climate financing deal is. The rich countries cause the damage. They make up 2/3 of existing carbon emissions, 2/3. So how can they get away with loans? If you break it, you pay for it. Shouldn't that apply to rich countries? Ideally, yes. But the problem is that climate financing has no binding definition. Look at what the United Nations says. Climate finance, according to the UN, refers to local, national or transnational financing drawn from public, private and alternative sources of financing that seeks to support mitigation and adaptation actions that will address climate change. I know it sounds complicated, but here's the simple breakdown. Any money meant to address climate change is climate financing. It can be loans or grants or investments, anything, which is quite a broad definition. So rich countries are using this loophole, and this is just one strategy that they use. Developed countries have many more. For example, double counting, counting the same money again. In 2005, the European Union made a promise. They said we will spend 0.7% of our GDP on climate financing. In 2010, they made another promise to raise $7 billion for climate finance. Now, both of these were separate promises, but guess what? The EU double counted it. The same money was counted as part of both the promises. And Britain did the same. They had promised $500 million for humanitarian work in other countries, like Afghanistan and Yemen. This is humanitarian, not climate work. Yet Britain counted it as both. And this seems to be common practice. Climate finance is being used to fund other projects, projects that have nothing to do with climate. The question is, how can we stop this? For starters, settle on a definition for climate finance. Keep loans out of it. Then we can have a serious discussion. Also, scrutinize the accounting books. Don't let countries get away with double counting or mislabeling. Only then will climate financing be meaningful. Vantage continues after a short break.
States like states and union territories like Manipur, Dadra and Nagar Haveli, Haryana, Himachal, Karnataka, Telangana, Arunachal Pradesh, Chandigarh, Lakshadweep, Nagaland, Jharkhand, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, Assam, Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Uttarakhand and Maharashtra, all these places the Congress has increased its vote share. It's increased its vote. So these are places where they've increased their vote share, but there are 16 states and union territories where they've decreased their vote share. So it's not been a growth pan-India all along, but there are some places where they've seen sharp growth. Susiben Shah of Shiv Sena is with us. The Shinde faction, we are given to understand that there is a demand for at least 2 cabinet berths, Susiben Shah. We just heard Prithviraj Chavan saying that this Yuti, which is currently in government there, may not last for long. Eknath Shinde may be asked to resign as Maharashtra CM, one of the rumors floating. Devendra Fadnavis has said, I want to step down as Deputy CM. Ajit Pawar is upset that you did not allow me to win Baramati. What's happening?
Good evening to all, and let me begin by accepting the people's mandate with all the humility, and I congratulate all winners in Maharashtra and across our country. Now, as you rightly begun at the beginning of the show, that we have a strike rate which is better than UBT. Yeah. We have a 47% strike rate. Zakaji might doubt it, but let me tell you, Zakaji, that we have done our homework. In the evening, last evening, there was a huddle. We all sat together and we analyzed data.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. American strategic bombers drop precision weapons during drills with South Korean fighters. Jordan makes its biggest drug bust in years at the border with Saudi Arabia. And Chile is installing the world's largest camera for astronomy. Finally, we are taking you back in history. On this day in 1967, the Six-Day War broke out in West Asia. It was between Israel and the Arab states of Egypt, Jordan and Syria. The brief but bloody battle was the result of years of diplomatic friction. The war ended with a UN-brokered ceasefire, but it changed the map of West Asia. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We will see you tomorrow.
escalation.
Back live on the CNN News 18 Federal Bank Prime Time Studios. I'm Anand Narsuman, with me Zaka Jacob and Rahul Shiv Shankar. Mr. Dharmendra Yadav is with us. Dharmendra Yadav ji, नमस्ते. सबसे पहले तो आपको बहुत-बहुत बधाई. प्रचंड जीत और समाजवादी पार्टी का जो परफॉर्मेंस रहा है उत्तर प्रदेश में, उसने सबको चौंका दिया.
नहीं, ये चौंकाना, भले ही जो लोग सोचते थे कि समाजवादी पार्टी कमजोर है वो चौंक सकते हैं. हालांकि समाजवादी पार्टी 50 से भी ज़्यादा जीत रही थी उत्तर प्रदेश में. कई सीटों को प्रशासनिक तरीके से काउंटिंग में हराया, कई सीटों को प्रभावित किया है वोटिंग के दिन. बहुत सारी सीटों को वोटर लिस्ट में हेरा फेरी करके वोट डिलीट कर